Let's keep it going. And, a little bit of a quiet week in the SEC. Again, tends to happen, right? No Georgia, no Florida, a couple of these other teams, Kentucky, Arkansas, Auburn are all off. We do have a very intriguing one between Ole Miss and LSU. What's interesting about it is all of the money has come pouring in on LSU. Ole Miss opened as a 1.5-point favorite in the Betfred Sportsbook. It is now up to LSU minus 2.5 in the Betfred Sportsbook. The over-under in this one, very high of 68. And so the question becomes, what do bettors know about LSU that we don't know? Well, I don't think, to me, in my opinion, it's as much about LSU. I think it's actually about Ole Miss. And I think what we got to do, 30,000-foot view, let's think about Ole Miss. Really good team. Lane Kiffin's a good coach. I know we all had our jokes and our fun 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. This guy has evolved into a great college football head coach. I believe the stat is he's 18-3 in his last 21 games as Ole Miss head coach, which is inconceivable. But when you look at these two teams and where they have played so far this season and who they've played, it is worth noting a few things on Ole Miss. One, they've only played 2 road games all season long. One at Georgia Tech, one at Vanderbilt. We're not exactly talking about Knoxville, Tennessee for the Alabama game last week in terms of the road environments that Ole Miss has had to walk into. So they have played probably 2 of the easiest Power 5 road venues you could possibly play for. On top of that, it is also worth noting, if you want to argue they're the second best team in the SEC West, okay, I'm not going to fight you on that. But they have probably played the worst team in the SEC West, the worst team in the SEC East right now. I would argue probably the 2 worst teams in the SEC overall in Vandy and Auburn. They still have yet to play Alabama. And I know Alabama's flawed and there's problems in the program, but Alabama's still really good. They've still yet to play Mississippi State, obviously LSU, who they'll play this weekend, and Arkansas. And so you look at who Ole Miss has played. You look at where they've played them. 5 of their 7 games have been at home. You look at the fact that, let's remember, that Kentucky game, and I don't like to play the what if and coulda, shoulda, woulda. I think we all watched that game, and we all kind of know Kentucky probably should have won that game. Ole Miss wins 22-19. Kentucky misses 2 extra points. They miss a field goal. Kentucky also fumbles on back-to-back drives. And I know one of the plays, there was a questionable, was it a helmet to helmet? Was it not? But in the end, Kentucky was on the goal line with a chance to win that game. Ole Miss survives. Credit to them for getting to 7-0 at this point. But when I look at this Ole Miss team, what I see is a team that has not gone on the road into a venue like what they will see at LSU this weekend. Now, it is worth noting, one thing on Ole Miss, we talk about it a lot. They do one thing really, really, really well, and it's something we always try to emphasize on this show. I think most people, when they think Lane Kiffin, they think air it out, throw the ball 60 times a game, just having fun out there. No, that's actually the guy across the state, Mike Leach. Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss, has an elite run offense this year, 271 yards per game. And what's especially interesting about that is that the only 2 teams ahead of them are Air Force and Army, which are 2 obvious triple option teams. So you're talking about 2 triple option teams that are ahead of them in rushing yardage. They are number 3 ahead of everybody else, ahead of Arkansas and UCLA and all these teams that run the ball really effectively. With LSU, a couple things. One, first of all, I hate to brag. I did tell you last week LSU was going to go to the Swamp and win. And what stands out to me about LSU is a few things. One, they are much more battle-tested than this Ole Miss team, right? Keep in mind, they have already played Mississippi State at home, who I think is a legit top 25 team. We'll get to them later. They've also played Tennessee at home, which might be the best team in college football. They've already played at Auburn at night. They've already played at Florida at night. They've already played Florida State on a neutral field. And so you look at this team, 1, they are much more battle-tested than Ole Miss. 2, I think they're starting to hit a stride with LSU. Listen, you can't judge LSU 2 weeks ago on what happened against Tennessee. As we found out, Tennessee's just a really good football team. Wow, Hendon Hooker threw for a lot of yards against LSU. Guess what? He's going to do it to everybody. He did it to Bama. He's going to do it to Georgia in a few weeks. He's going to do it to Kentucky. I saw that Kentucky is already open as a 14-point underdog against Tennessee. We'll save that conversation for next week. But I just bring it up because Hendon Hooker is going to do this against everybody, okay? So don't put aside the Tennessee game. And like I told you, They really kind of gifted Tennessee 10 points, the fumble of the punt, and of course, Brian Kelly's questionable play calling late in the first half, which led to a Tennessee field goal. So all of a sudden, I'm not saying that 30-17 feels better, but I think it does feel different. And then you got to look at what they did last week against Florida. They were the significantly better team against Florida. Remember, Florida was favored at home against LSU. LSU won by 10, and I don't think it was that close. LSU gave up one big play to Anthony Richardson. LSU, Jack Beck again, another fumble recovered by the opposing team. That's basically 14 points that they just gave Florida in that game. You take out one big run. You take out one muff punt. All of a sudden, that is a 45 to probably 21 final score. And we're like, oh, LSU is way better than we think. That's also why I'm not as concerned about some other variables coming in. I think people would just look at the box score against when they played Florida last week and say, well, they gave up a lot of rushing yards, and that's very concerning because, Ole Miss wants to run the ball really well. Well, they did give up a lot of rushing yards, but 109 were to Anthony Richardson of the 210 that they had all game long. 109 were by Anthony Richardson, and it is worth noting, and I know I say worth noting a lot, but I always worth noting, 81 of them came on one play. So you take out 81 yards from Anthony Richardson, all of a sudden we're talking about a team that rushed for about 130 yards on 30 carries. So I'm just sitting here saying, I think LSU is the better team. And I think they were the better team than Florida. I don't think they're better than Ole Miss. But when you look at Ole Miss on the road, first real tough road environment, it's a 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern kick. It is the SEC game of the week. That fan base will be fired up. I'm telling you, LSU's a 2.5-point favorite. I think they are the right side here in the Betfred Sportsbook.